The film opens with Melanie lying in bed as the lights in her cell switch on. She rises and begins her morning routine for school. Two soldiers enter, and although she greets them cheerfully,
Good morning, Private Devani.
they focus solely on securing her in a wheelchair. They roll her out into the hallway, lining her up with other children like herself. Melanie and her peers are arranged in a classroom, each positioned by their assigned numbers. Melanie requests that their teacher, Miss Justino, tell them a story and suggests reading a myth that could be considered part of history. The teacher, somewhat reluctantly, agrees and narrates the myth of Pandora's box. After class, Melanie is escorted back to her cell, where the soldiers, tense and edgy, ignore her goodnight wishes.
Good night, Private Dylan. Good night, Private Devani.
Later, she is served dinner, a plate full of worms. She falls asleep while eating. The following day, Dr. Caldwell visits Melanie. The girl has successfully solved a riddle previously given to her by the doctor, so she is presented with a new challenge, a logic problem involving Schrodinger's cat.
It's a logic problem.
When Melanie struggles to provide an answer, Dr. Caldwell notes her behavior and reads it back, referring to her as a subject. Finally, the doctor asks Melanie for a number.
13.
Thank you.
Later, the soldiers collect Melanie and the other children for school. As Melanie is wheeled past the numbered cells, she notices that cell 13 remains unopened. Upon arriving in the classroom, the seat corresponding to number 13 is also empty. The teacher assigns a writing task, causing the children to worry about what stories to tell. Melanie, however, writes a lengthy story in her notebook. When the teacher asks for volunteers to read their work aloud, Melanie eagerly raises her hand, presenting a tale where she portrays herself as the hero and savior. The teacher, moved by Melanie's story, approaches her, intending to touch her. At that moment, Sergeant Parks storms into the classroom, yelling that touching the children is strictly forbidden. To emphasize his point, he rolls up his sleeve and brings his arm close to one of the children. The child sniffs him, unhinges its jaw, and attempts to bite. The other children mimic this behavior. After the class, Sergeant Parks enters Melanie's cell while others prepare to remove her restraints. Melanie antagonizes him, prompting him to leave her bound to the chair. That night, Miss Justino visits Melanie and discovers she has been left restrained. She enters the cell to free her. As she does, Melanie catches the teacher's scent and begins to transform like the other children. Before fully turning, Melanie urges the teacher to leave.
No! Get out!
Later that night, Dr. Caldwell visits Melanie again. They have a conversation, and the doctor asks Melanie for another number. Melanie responds with 4, which happens to be her cell number. The next morning, Sergeant Parks arrives to collect Melanie. He escorts her out of the cell and into an elevator. As they exit the facility, the sound of gunshots fills the air, with soldiers seen running and firing towards the military complex's fence. Confused by the chaos, Melanie is wheeled to another part of the complex and brought into a laboratory where Dr. Caldwell awaits. Dr. Caldwell inquires about Schrodinger's cat, but when Melanie doesn't provide the desired answer, the doctor elaborates that the cat in the box is both alive and dead, similar to Melanie. A second doctor administers a sedative into Melanie's arm, causing her to pass out instantly. They place her on a slab and restrain her, but she soon regains consciousness. Miss Justino rushes in to prevent the doctor from performing surgery on Melanie. After a few persuasive words, Justino convinces the teacher to lower her weapon, then quickly pepper sprays her, incapacitating her so the soldiers can take her into custody. Dr. Caldwell explains that she isn't merely dissecting Melanie, but intends to use her as a source for a vaccine. Justino is taken away, and alarms begin to blare. Dr. Caldwell instructs the other doctor to drop the shutters, but as she does, a zombie crashes through the glass and attacks her viciously. Caldwell manages to kill the zombies, injuring her hand in the process. The other doctor starts to turn, but Caldwell escapes the lab just in time. Melanie is left alone with the zombie, which surprisingly does not harm her. Seizing the opportunity, she grabs a scalpel and frees herself from the restraints. Stepping outside, Melanie is confronted with complete chaos. Zombies are running rampant, attacking soldiers who struggle to fend them off. Amidst the mayhem, she sees Justino being beaten by soldiers. Filled with rage, Melanie charges at the soldiers, attacking and biting them until they are dead, before collapsing. Justino regains consciousness to find Melanie beside her. She picks Melanie up and rushes her into a military vehicle. As the vehicle speeds away, the zombies overrun the complex. Sometime later, the vehicle halts in a desolate area. Parks and Kieran realize that Melanie is in the back with them. Justino lets Melanie out, despite Caldwell's protests that it is not her decision to make. Melanie steps out and stops a short distance from the vehicle, experiencing the outside world for the first time. The others remain by the vehicle, futilely attempting to contact other outposts via radio. As Caldwell demands that they retrieve her test subject, Parks, Kieran, and Caldwell search the vehicle for supplies, but find only a mask used for handling zombies, with no food or water in sight. The sergeant devises a plan to head south to Beacon, assuming everyone back at the complex, aside from the zombie children, is dead. They place Melanie in the gunner's seat of the vehicle, securely strapped in and masked, and proceed to a river to collect water. Upon arrival, they encounter a few zombies, triggering a shootout with the soldiers. During the skirmish, one soldier is bitten. Parks waits to see if he will turn, and when the process begins, he shoots him and closes the vehicle doors. Parks notices that Justino has brought Melanie inside, making him extremely uneasy. Melanie inquires about the zombies, and Caldwell explains they are people infected by a fungus transmitted through bites. When Parks attempts to start the vehicle, he discovers it is inoperable, forcing them to travel on foot through London, a shorter but more perilous route. Parks and Kieran survey the area they must traverse, filled with zombies. They inform the group that the only option is to pass through the zombies and find shelter and supplies once inside the city. The group cautiously moves through a mass of sleeping zombies, careful not to disturb them. Suddenly, they reach a dead end, and Parks halts. A zombie mother approaches, pushing a baby carriage. Caldwell steps forward to stop her and notices movement in the carriage. Upon inspection, she finds a rat inside, causing her to yelp and wake the zombie mother, followed by the others. The group narrowly escapes. They navigate the zombie-infested streets, eventually finding an abandoned hospital. They enter and discover an opening to another floor, where they climb up to a safer location. Parks, Justino, and Kieran immediately go on patrol while Caldwell and Melanie stay behind. As they are left alone, Melanie asks about her origins. Caldwell explains that she and others like her were discovered in a maternity ward at a hospital. Their mothers had been infected with the fungus while pregnant, allowing the infection to reach them through the placenta. Caldwell adds that they are different from other zombies, able to think and react almost like real people. Later, Justino returns with new clothes for Melanie and apologizes for not finding any food. That night, Parks and Justino discuss Melanie, and Parks mentions that the girl loves her. Meanwhile, Kieran is guarding Melanie, and she forms a bond with him as well. The next morning, they notice an increasing number of zombies gathering in front of the hospital. With no clear escape, Melanie proposes a plan.
The only one who can go down there and not get hurt.
Since the zombies do not attack her, she suggests going outside to find a way to lure the zombies away from the building. Although Caldwell is against the idea, the others agree due to the lack of alternatives. Before leaving, Melanie asks to change into her new clothes. She steps outside and moves among the zombies without any issues. Suddenly, she spots a cat, hunts it, and eats it raw. Later, she enters a house and finds a small dog. Returning to the hospital, she uses the dog as a decoy to draw the zombies away from the building. Once the area is clear, Parks puts the mask and handcuffs back on Melanie, and they resume their journey through the abandoned city, heading towards Beacon. On their journey, the group notices something unusual, the fungus sprouting from the bodies of the zombies. Caldwell theorizes that this represents the next stage in the fungus's life cycle. She explains to Melanie that in her case, the fungus acts more like a symbiote rather than a parasite, as it does in others. As they venture deeper into the city, they encounter a massive growth of bodies merging into a colossal fungus. Caldwell suspects this formation is why there are no walking zombies in the area. She warns that when enough zombies gather, they transform into the mature stage of the fungus, capable of pollinating vast areas, potentially affecting the entire world.
The end of the world. Probably.
While navigating the city, they come across a mobile laboratory. They enter the vehicle and begin inspecting it. Parks attempts to start the engine and use the radio, but both are unresponsive. Kieran goes on a supply run, while Melanie grows uneasy, indicating she needs to eat. They allow her to hunt, and she quickly finds and devours her prey. After eating, she hears a strange noise and follows it to a bookstore. Peering inside, she sees a group of children communicating with grunts. Realizing they are like her, she watches as one of them detects a scent and leads the group outside. Back at the mobile lab, Caldwell's condition worsens, and she reveals to Justino that she has sepsis. She begins discussing Melanie again,
Would you let me have her?
stating that she needs Melanie's brain and spine to develop a vaccine, much to Justino's dismay. Melanie returns and describes the children she encountered, warning that they might hunt Kieran. Meanwhile, Kieran is walking down a street, finding an unopened can and then another, leading him to a store. He crawls under the shutter to enter. Once inside, he starts eating and browsing dirty magazines. A little girl appears behind him, startling him. She lures him deeper into the store where more children suddenly surround him. Their leader arrives, and together they attack Kieran. Meanwhile, Melanie leads Parks and Justino to Kieran. Using her heightened sense of smell, she tracks him like the other children did. They finally arrive at the store, where they find Kieran half-eaten. Realizing the children had set a trap for all of them, they quickly exit and see the group of kids waiting. Melanie challenges the leader, engaging in a fierce fight. After killing him, she asserts her dominance, ensuring the others recognize her as the strongest. This allows her to protect Parks and Justino and lead them to safety. Returning to the lab, they discover the door ajar. Upon entering, Caldwell sedates them with a gas. She drags Melanie toward the slab to perform her procedure, but hesitates due to the intense pain in her hand. While tending to her injury, Melanie regains consciousness. They converse, with Caldwell attempting to persuade Melanie to sacrifice herself for the vaccine. Melanie nearly agrees, but poses one last question: whether Caldwell believes she is truly alive or merely mimicking human behavior. Caldwell answers that she believes Melanie is alive. Melanie then retorts,
And why should it be us who die for you?
and runs out, leaving the doctor behind. Caldwell follows, albeit slowly, as Melanie heads towards the massive fungus they had previously discovered. She sets it on fire, intending to release the spores. Unbeknownst to her, Parks had followed and got infected. As he begins to turn, he pleads with Melanie to shoot him before he becomes one of them. Later, Justino wakes up in the lab, protected from the spores. She realizes what Melanie has done and finds her waiting outside the lab. Some time has passed. Melanie brings out a whiteboard and begins a class, with the zombie children listening from the other side of the lab window. Now their leader, Melanie ensures they all attend Miss Justino's lessons together, signaling a new beginning. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.